On today's Locked On Bucks, we have some news on Khris Middleton. It is not the news that we hope for. We'll take a look at the first look at the injury report for the game at home against the 76ers. And this begins I guess we can call it homestand for the Bucks. 5 of their next 6 games played at Fiserv Forum. We'll take a look at those games and the importance of this quasi homestand of sorts. And speaking of those games, the other games taking place in the Eastern Conference and the constant movement that we see in those standings, is there one specific team that the Bucks should look to avoid, if at all possible, in the playoffs? We dissect that as well coming up on Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The Locked On Bucks, I'm Justin Garcia, joined by Camille Davis. You can hear me on the Bucks Radio Network. You can find Camille's work, in addition to Locked On the Technical Foul podcast and basically every Packers podcast that is out there as well, which it's a busy time of year for you once more now. Camille, you got to worry about the push to the playoffs and now free agency in the NFL. But we both thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen each and every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and viewable on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's Locked On Bucks is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. We start with the bad news, Camille. That is, I know I pointed to quite a bit of optimism of, guys, I think Khris is going to play Thursday against the 76ers. And wouldn't you know it, when the injury report comes out, Khris Middleton has been ruled out once again. Now, I suppose you can't slam the door on him being upgraded from out to questionable. We have seen that before with other players. But I'm going to once again cling to the optimistic view. If he misses this game, which it appears he's going to against the 76ers, you get 2 days off between that game and your next game Sunday afternoon at home against the 76ers. I understand neither of us know the answer to this question, but on a scale of 1 to 10, your confidence that we'll see Khris Middleton Sunday against the Phoenix Suns?
Jeez. The amount of times I've said Khris is close. He's close. Based on reports, he's close. He's close. And now he's just out, at least on the game against the Kings. He was questionable and then he was out. But this game coming up now, he's just out. I don't know. I guess on a scale of 1 through 10, give me a strong 5.5. I'm right there in the middle. Like, at this point, I have no grasp and concept of when that return will be. We've heard soon. We've heard close for so long now. I've been trying to be like, it's really getting there, guys. Like, I was adding extra closes to my close to say like just how close I thought we were, but then we see the news today that he's also out. So I can't wait to hear what Doc says about the injury report with Khris Middleton, because to be questionable on Tuesday and then just straight on out for Thursday, it's interesting. And I wonder what's the thought behind that and what's going on with that. I saw he did do the on-court workouts on Tuesday, a little bit warmed up a little bit before the game as well. So I'm hopeful that it's not a setback or anything like that, and rather that the Bucks are still just taking their time and bringing him back into the lineup.
You know what? I'm going to choose to be optimistic here and say that the additional off days between this game, some more treatment that he'll get between now and Sunday, I'm going to say 7, that we see Khris Middleton make his return on Sunday in an afternoon game against the Phoenix Suns, because like I mentioned, the time off that you would get, that he's going to continue to get, and the fact that it's an afternoon game, you then get even more time off, the 2 days off before the Bucks hit the road. I would assume, making the assumption that Khris is going to be back on Sunday, we're not going to see him in both games. We're not going to see Khris Middleton play both games of any back-to-back from here on out, and I think the Bucks only have 3 left. And I get there is frustration, though it seems like it has died down a little bit. I don't know if you've noticed anything differently, Camille, but it does seem as though Bucks fans have kind of realized, look, we need Khris Middleton in April, May, and June. I would like to see Khris Middleton in February and March, but we absolutely need him in mid-April, May, and hopefully June when we're in the playoffs. And if this is what gets us there, fine. If you're telling me we'll have him for those games and he'll be, if not 100%, as close as he can be to 100%, I'll take this. I'll deal with the frustration of this team not being 100% until the very last moment if it means we see this group complete once the playoffs begin.
I've been seeing a lot of people just kind of exasperated by the situation at this point,
Yeah.
kind of just like, okay, this is getting out of control now. When is he coming back? So there's still, of course, the subset of people I see who are like, they need to trade him this summer. He can't be healthy, so on and so forth, which as people listen to this show, the everydayers know I don't subscribe to that train of thought when it comes to 22. So there is a lot of fan base that has mellowed out and said, okay, and I think having Dame helps with that because you're like, hey, this is someone else for Giannis to be working with, have another guy to help carry the load while Khris is recovering. Now, if there was no Dame Lillard on this team, I'm sure that the general consensus might be a little bit more agitated and just kind of like raring to see him get back on the court. But having Dame does afford you a little bit of a luxury in that sense. But of course, you want Khris back on the court. He's such a crucial part to what they do. And I can't wait to see what some of those three-man actions might look like with Dame, with Khris, and with Giannis all together on the court as well. So yeah, need him back. There are always going to be some people in the trade Khris Middleton bandwagon, the start or bring him off the bench bandwagon, the so on and so forth. But I'm just ready to see him get back on the court, starting and developing his chemistry as well with these guys as they get ready for this postseason run.
I don't want to get too sidetracked here, but I've seen that same contingency. It's time to move on and it's time to trade him. And even after the game against the Kings, there was more of that chatter with Brook Lopez, and we've heard that quite a bit this year. You and I talked about this earlier in the year on a couple of those shows, in that it's not really fair to Brook Lopez the way that we've kind of viewed him a lot of times when the defense was struggling, especially early in the season, because it was a defense that was under attack. When you think about the point of attack defense, the blow-bys that they were giving up, the amount of rim pressures, and everybody can point to the contested shots and where Brook Lopez ranks. And look, it's about the same as last year, even fewer than he's given up. But the difference is last year it was by design, right? You were funneling what you wanted to Brook Lopez. And this year it was just everything was coming at him. And I think that's a lot of what we saw against the Sacramento Kings. I know it's easy to point to, man, Domas Sabonis really bodied Brook Lopez and dominated him. And to be fair, there were some plays where even I raised an eyebrow. Oh man, Domas is going at
Got him twice.
Yeah, and Domas got Giannis too.
Yeah.
So Domas was in a different mood in that game on Tuesday night. But the point is, it's not as simple as, man, Brook is old and washed. I think a lot of it depends on what the perimeter defense is doing for him. But the overall point that I was about to make is, look, if that's your viewpoint of these guys are done, it's time to move on, okay, well then what's the value that you're going to get for them? If it's these guys are washed, you can't have them, they have to trade them for absolutely anything. How is that going to make the Bucks better? You know, in a time where you have Giannis and Damian Lillard and your championship window is open. So I understand the frustration, but let's also be realistic about this. And I don't think a lot of those takes have been realistic.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that sentence than what you already said. And one thing I will say before we move on, with Brook getting posterized twice in the same game, I was seeing some people, of course, just being like, well, he's so soft. He's a soft 7-footer, so on and so forth. And I say this often with shot blockers because we know that Brook is a shot blocker. You're going to get dunked on from time to time. It is an occupational hazard. It's just part of the gig. Sometimes you get them and sometimes you get got. And Brook just so happened to get got a couple of times against the Kings. That is not an indictment on who he is altogether. It's not like he's getting dunked on all the time or anything like that. But it's an occupational hazard when you're a shot blocker. Sometimes it happens. So I wanted to throw that out there before we moved on. But yeah, I definitely agree with your piece about, well, what do you do? How do you move on from that? Like, I still think that, especially given the salary situation with the Bucks, like this is probably your best option going forward right now. Now, who knows what the postseason brings this year and what changes might be made after that because of what happens. but right now with what we've seen, doesn't make sense.
To that last point, I'll concede this. Look, if we have a redo of last year and the same scenario happens, anything is on the table. And I'm sure this team is more likely to say, this is not working. We have to re-examine everything. And then anything is on the table. But if this team performs as expected, you understand what your window is. And that lines up with what you have left in Brook Lopez and in Khris Middleton. So again, not the news we were hoping for on Khris Middleton. It's still TBD. Instead of listing him as out, let's just list Khris Middleton as TBD on every single injury report until we get to that game where he finally makes his return to the floor. So we got a lot more to get to. We mentioned the possible matchups. Is there a blueprint for beating the Bucks and a team that you want to avoid in the postseason? Also, the games that are being played throughout the Eastern Conference these next couple of days. Some important ones there as the Bucks look to continue their climb in the standings, or at least hold off those teams behind them. We'll get into those conversations coming up after the break on Locked On Bucks. Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 3 million members. They're the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports because it's just you against the numbers. You pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and from there, watch the winnings roll in. It's demon time right now on Prize Picks. You can win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. Demons and Goblins are the newest and most exciting way to play at Prize Picks. Squares marked with red demons or green goblins get you different payouts. You can now win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. If you wanted to make any combos as well, you can do that. You can take a look at Steph Curry for more than 29 points, Nikola Jokic for more than 10 rebounds, Giannis for more than 6 assists. That has been the norm. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. That website again, prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA, and be sure to use the code LockedOnNBA, and you'll get your first deposit match up to $100 on Prize Picks. As you know, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel, Locked On Sports Today. And baseball fans, mark your calendars for March 20th. A week away now, less than a week away. 7 o'clock Eastern time for the best MLB season preview coming exclusively to Locked On Sports Today. On March 20th, 7 p.m. Eastern. Be the first to get local insight from the MLB local experts of Locked On's podcast network. Find it on March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Camille, on to the big topics of the day. So Aaron Rodgers is going to be the vice president. I don't want to bombard you with too much of that. I'm sure you're already dealing with that. These teams in the Eastern Conference, we talked quite a bit about the comments that Doc Rivers made last night when he was asked, I believe, by Eric Name about those matchups that we've seen and whether or not there were some similarities between the Kings and the Pacers, but just the broad sentiment of, this is an older team, as we just went through when discussing Brook Lopez and Khris Middleton. It's an older team. Doc even himself said, a week or so ago when he was asked about the pace dropping off since his arrival, and said, look, we don't necessarily like to push it. Dame likes to play at his own pace. I'm not concerned about how quickly we get up and down the floor and how many possessions we get. I'm more concerned with the quality of the possessions that we get. But we're seeing more and more teams that play at the opposite level of pace than the Bucks. And he was asked, is this a concern of yours for the postseason? We dissected those comments on yesterday's show, and I think credit to Doc Rivers for at least being candid and saying, yeah, it is a concern in the back of our mind. We think we can fix it. We're not there yet, though. Is there a team or a specific style that you would say, look, if at all possible, other than the Boston Celtics. The Bucks need to avoid this team in the postseason.
Now, given the fact that they're in the Eastern Conference and looking at who could be potential matchups for them, I don't feel very strongly about that. Like, thank God that the Warriors or the Kings aren't two of the teams that the Bucks could see in the playoffs, at least not until the finals. So that is very good because those are two teams that have really dynamic point guards, a lot of off-ball movement, quick. Right. So we knew that was going to be a problem. And it was mentioned like that's part of the problem as to why the Pacers gave the Bucks a run for their money this season. And I believe it was Malik Beasley himself said when he was getting interviewed earlier in the season, like the Pacers, they play weird. They play just different than a lot of other teams play. He's like, but I feel like we can figure that out come playoff time. It's just regular season. It's just different how they play basketball. So one could point to the Pacers and say that's a matchup that might not be super favorable for the Bucks, but like I said, I think remember if it was yesterday's show or the show before that, but I'd welcome a Pacers matchup in the first round because I feel like these teams are pretty different in how they're constructed right now than when they last saw each other with the scheduling quirk of their season series being over come June 3rd or January 3rd. I mean,
I hope not June 3rd.
Please not.
Well, I mean, I suppose it means the Bucks are in the conference finals.
And it's against the Pacers somehow. I don't know how that will work seating wise, but hey, whatever.
The Pacers came out of the play-in and took down the Celtics in the first round.
This is all hypotheticals right now. Who knows what's going to happen? But I mean, that's a team whose play style might cause them some problems. But to Doc's point about trying to figure out different ways to solve that and kind of being clear, like, hey, I'll be real with y'all right now. It is a concern. I'm thinking about it, but I do think there's a way that we can solve that puzzle. So that's encouraging. I mean, you could also look at the Miami Heat just off of the sheer principle of the history we have with the Heat and how that team always tends to perform in the playoffs. Like Jimmy Butler himself has pretty much said, like, you want to know, like, I'll become the best player like in the world come playoff time. And it's like, I figured it out at this point, Jimmy. We understand how you approach the regular season at this point, and then come playoff time, how much, I'm saying you take it more seriously, but he takes it more seriously.
Takes it extra seriously. Yeah.
Yes. Like it's just a different gear that he goes to. So you can't count the Heat off. In addition to that, the Heat do have some guys that love that off-ball movement as well that could pose some challenges with your Duncan Robinson coming off of the curls and the off-ball screens and the actions to get him open, as well as Tyler Hero as well. So they could do some things that could make it difficult on the Bucks, but there's not a matchup in the bottom of the East where I'm like, oh, by all means, we need to avoid this matchup. I think the Bucks can take out anybody that is listed, in that 4 through 10 spot right now.
Yeah, I think we're kind of aligned there in that there's not really a team per se that I would say, oh, you got to avoid that team because, we talked about this quite a bit on recent shows. There is no real easy path anymore in the East. When you think back to even when the Bucks started this ascent to the level that they're at now, you knew the 1 and the 2 seed were getting a relatively easy opponent. We saw what the Bucks did to the Pistons in the first round. The next year, they lost 1 game, but we saw what they did to the Orlando Magic. Those days are gone. When you think about the play-in tournament and how that changes, you don't know who you're getting until the very last minute if you're the 1 seed. But also, when you look at what's happened to the East, it is very top-heavy. And Doc Rivers made that remark, I think, before the Clippers game when he was asked about some of the differences between the West and the East and what he's observed. The East is top-heavy, but it's kind of leveled off for all of those teams that are in the mid-tier, and it's expanded where that mid-tier is no longer what you would see of, man, there's 1 or 2 really good teams or elite teams. Then you got 3 or so teams, maybe 4 that are pretty good, and then it's just forget about it. There's nobody else you need to pay attention to in the conference. That second tier, well, in this case, third tier with the way you're looking at the Boston Celtics, but that tier has expanded to like 5 or 6 teams now. And what that does, is it means, okay, it's not just the 4 versus 5 matchup is this should be competitive. And this is maybe where we see the lower seed win. It's now moved all the way up to potentially even the 2 versus 7. Or look, I think none of us would be broken up about it, but what if the Miami Heat are the 8 seed once again, and they get the Boston Celtics? What if the 76ers are the 8 seed and Joel Embiid just made his comeback, and your first round matchup is Embiid, Maxey, and Nick Nurse going against the Boston Celtics. So there are no real easy paths. I think every single Bucks fan, if they were asked, who would you like to play? And I would do this too. You would choose the Orlando Magic because not a whole lot of postseason experience, not only from the players. Jamal Mosley, I know he has experience as an assistant, but this is his first time in the postseason as a head coach. And as good as their defense is, it's an offense that's going to really struggle to muster points, especially in the half court. So I think the big thing is, we talked about this, I think 2 shows ago. You don't want to avoid all of those teams. Like it almost behooves you to start with a test in the first round. And you go back to 2021, the Bucks played the Miami Heat. Khris Middleton, wouldn't you know it, hits the game winner in game 1 of that series. And look, who knows where that series goes and where the Bucks postseason run goes if they lose game 1 to those same Miami Heat at home. But that series really tested you. And I think it allowed the Bucks to exercise some demons as well. But you went against a tough coach. They weren't the same team they had been in years past, but it's still the Miami Heat in the postseason. And I think those are the types of things you need. You need those types of tune-ups. That one of the things we mentioned before is, I wouldn't be opposed to playing the Miami Heat. For me, the one team I would be opposed to playing, believe it or not, is the Philadelphia 76ers. I know we've longed for it for years and said, when is Giannis going to play Joel Embiid? The circumstances for this one are what I would not want if I was the Bucks. When you think about what we just mentioned, Joel Embiid is going to be making his return. Before that injury, who knows what he's going to be since. But before that injury, Joel Embiid was a cheat code, right? He was the best offensive player we had seen this season. No team had an answer for him. Nick Nurse is a very good coach. Nick Nurse has schemed up ways to stop Giannis in the past. And do you think the 76ers would have any extra motivation going up against their former coach that they just fired the offseason prior? So to me, I know some of those that's a lot of ifs and crazy, but to me, the 76ers are still that team of, man, I hope they don't end up on the other side of the Bucks seed line.
I mean, and they absolutely could, but the only, I don't know if call it a benefit, but the other side to that is if you do get the 76ers in the first round, whatever team does, if Joel Embiid is coming right back, the only advantage that you have is that he's going to be at a conditioning disadvantage. So you might be able to get
stop the presses. It's the playoffs, and he's
right. So it's like you might be able to get a little bit more out of your own team because he's going to have to catch up to the rest of the conditioning levels of everybody else on the court. But I mean, that could be one, but Doc Rivers would also be pretty motivated to be like,
very much so.
My team got Philly out of here. And Pat Bev is on this Bucks team as well. He's already talked about how he feels now when he's seeing Philly on the schedule. So there's, of course, that beef there. And then there's also the fans and the years of going back and forth between Milwaukee and Philly and their fans. I will never forget them sending a contingent of fans to Milwaukee to boo Malcolm Brogdon.
The rights to Ricky Sanchez guys, yeah.
Yep, only to see that he was not playing and then just choosing like Tony Snell, like, we're going to just boo you in his place. Like, listen, it would be tough for sure. Joel Embiid is one of the world's best players for sure. But again, you roll the ball out and I trust what Giannis can do. I think he's, the best player in the world. So it'd be fun. I don't have the same concern levels with Philly, but I get it. I definitely do get it. And I would prefer for, Boston to see them if at all possible,
absolutely.
Rather than Milwaukee.
Look, I think we would both prefer, man, it'd be nice if Boston was looking at, look, we're getting either Philly or Miami in the first round. That's what we're dealing with. None of us would have a problem with that. We'll take your thoughts on it as well. Is there a specific team the Bucks need to avoid in the playoffs this year? Leave yours in the comments of today's show. When we come back, Camille, we'll take a look at some of those games on the schedule and what this fluid Eastern Conference looks like day by day. Also, 2 other tidbits. One you and I discussed about something that is coming out later this summer, and Doc Rivers even alluded to it over the weekend in Los Angeles. And speaking of Doc Rivers, I'm going to thrust this one on you coming up after the break. But what if we saw this path for Doc Rivers in the postseason? We'll get into that conversation after this on Locked On Bucks. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. So, Camille, taking a look at the games on the scoreboard in the East. As we tape this, the Cavaliers are playing in New Orleans against the Pelicans. It is just about to move into the fourth quarter, and the Cavaliers are up by 7. Donovan Mitchell is back for Cleveland. So I believe all told it was 5 games that he missed with that PRP injection, but that's a big boost for the Cavaliers. The Magic beat the Brooklyn Nets. So the Orlando Magic continue to flirt with a top 4, likely top 5 spot in the Eastern Conference. So as we were saying, man, if you could pick a team, I think it would be the Magic. It's looking more and more like that might not be likely. And the big ones, Miami currently losing to the Denver Nuggets, and the Indiana Pacers and Chicago Bulls in a tight one late in the fourth quarter. So that game is interesting, the Pacers and Bulls game, because the Bulls are pretty much locked in where they are. I think the only things that we really know at this point in the East, with a month left in the regular season, is the Boston Celtics are going to be the 1 seed, and the order is still TBD, but we know the Bulls and Hawks are probably going to be 9 and 10. Everything in between there from 2 through 8 is completely wide open, which in itself is crazy for the Eastern Conference. That's what we've grown used to seeing in the West, and now it's finally come to the East.
Yeah, absolutely. And the race between 4 and 8 in the East is so close right now. It's like 2.5 games separating 5 teams at the moment. We took a look at that on Technical Foul this week and trying to predict of these 5 teams here that are in that jumble with the Knicks, with the Magic, the Pacers, the 76ers, and the Heat, which of those 5 teams is most likely to have the highest seed amongst them? And taking a look at that in the schedules and whatnot, the Heat have the second easiest remaining schedule of those 5. And then after them comes the Orlando Magic with the 7th easiest schedule, and still one of the catchiest jingles going with that Orlando Magic. I'm a big fan of that song. So we're going to see, but the fact that Orlando, I just want to take this moment that they're the 5 seed because they started the season off really well. And looking at the schedules, okay, they have a tough December coming up. Let's see how they look coming out of that stretch. And they lost a lot of games during that stretch, but they've been able to rebound. And here they are right now, 5 seed in the East as we record, with a chance to make a move up. So it's really fun to see the standings this close in the East. Like you said, we're far past the days of the Eastern Conference being the Leastern Conference. Like the tiers and the talent levels have just increased. And that just makes basketball fun just as a fan of the sport. The day-to-day, just checking the standings, seeing how things are shaking out. The game intensity is up for so many games across the league right now because there's so many teams with something to play for, and you can see it. I mean, you felt it in Sacramento when the Bucks were there. Like, it felt like playoff intensity at certain points in that game. Now, the game became a blowout pretty early, but you could feel it in the audience, the way the Kings came out, and that's the fun part about basketball at this time of the year. So looking at the East in particular, though, I can't call it. Like, it's going to be up in smoke. But like, if I had to pick amongst those 5 teams, again, the Knicks, Magic, Pacers, 76ers, and Heat, I would think the Knicks finish with the highest seed amongst those 5, just because they're getting healthy at this time. When they have OG in their lineup, they look a lot different. And I mean, I know they have a tougher remaining schedule. It's kind of middle of the pack for them going forward, but
Yeah,
they've been playing some pretty good ball.
So by the numbers, the odds are very much in the Bucks' favor, despite that schedule, to get the 2 seed. They have a 60% chance by one of the sites that I trust quite a bit, basically twice the odds that the Cavaliers have. And this despite the fact that they're tied in the loss column and that the Cavaliers, as of this moment, have the head-to-head tiebreaker. So they're putting a lot of faith in the Bucks' star power and the changes that we had seen defensively up until this road trip. But the way the Bucks were trending, I think, is what a lot of those models are favoring. The Bucks do have an 88% chance to finish in the top 3, so second or third, which again, is, as we discussed earlier, coming out of the All-Star break, we heard more and more chatter, man, this team's going to drop below 4. This team could be in the play-in tournament. They got an 88% chance to finish in the top 3. Again, the tiebreaker over the Knicks is a big reason for that. But some of the interesting things, this same site, Camille, projects the Orlando Magic to finish with the 4th seed and the Knicks to finish 5th. To your point, though, about OG Anunoby, the Knicks are 13-2 in games that OG Anunoby has played in. They have the best defense in the league in those games, and I believe it's 8th best offense. They have been a totally different team with OG Anunoby on the floor, and he came back just the other night. So it's going to be interesting to see what that Knicks team looks like moving forward, and we're probably going to have a chance to see that team when the Bucks still play one game against the New York Knicks. So the long and short of it is, I still feel very good that the Bucks are not going to slide any lower than 3rd. I've long maintained, to me, it doesn't matter if you're 2nd or 3rd. What matters is that you're 2nd or 3rd, right? And not drop down to 4th. But it just, looking at everything else, it's impossible to say this is what the Bucks are going to end up with, because all of these teams, the percentage chances that they're given at any particular seed is basically flat from one seed to the next when you look at how bunched up things are. 2 games in the loss column that are separating those 5 teams. So again, literally any one of those teams, the Cavs, the Knicks, the Magic, the Pacers, the Sixers, the Heat, the Bucks could play any one of those teams in their first round matchup. That is how bizarre the Eastern Conference has been so far this season. Before we get to that Doc Rivers piece that you and I discussed before the show, what if, and I know we're way, way in front of ourselves getting into this conversation, so I'm not devoting time to it, Camille. I'm just merely throwing out there, what if? What if the Bucks' path to a potential championship was the Orlando Magic in the first round, the 76ers in the second round, the Boston Celtics in the third round, the Clippers in the finals? Do you see where I'm headed with that?
All Doc teams that he's formerly been involved with.
Doc Rivers revenge tour en route to an NBA championship. It is not impossible that could be the path. Maybe those teams change in the order, but it's not unlikely that the Bucks could face something, or at least most of those teams, in the postseason. And speaking of Doc, we're going to do something for this summer. But this past weekend with the Bucks in Los Angeles, a lot of the LA media was around, and a lot of the friendships that Doc Rivers sparked with them, his time with the Clippers. A lot of people came out to ask Doc Rivers questions while he was in Los Angeles on Friday, and especially Sunday when it was a Clippers home game. And some of those questions on Sunday were about Clipped, the FX series that is set to debut on June 4th, about the Clippers under the tenure of Donald Sterling, and the way that unwound, with Doc Rivers playing a pretty big role in keeping things together there. Doc Rivers is going to be played by Lawrence Fishburne on the show. It comes out, I believe it's Hulu exclusive, similar to what they did with The Bear. But June 4th is when that comes out. So we'll get a chance to see Doc Rivers on the silver screen being portrayed by Lawrence Fishburne. And he did joke too about, yeah, I think he's got the walk down. He's worked on that, but there's no way he's going to get the voice.
No, that's such a difficult voice to emulate. Like the way that Doc Rivers speaks is very hard to get
You
down.
gonna
The
try it?
walk. Give me some time to practice. Let me tell you something. I'm bad at impressions and I'm bad at accents. If I ever do an accent, it doesn't matter what country I'm trying to do. It always turns out to be Jamaican, and I don't know why. I'm just bad at it. So that's why I'm not going to be on Clipped or anything like that. But I can't wait to see it. I love little adaptations like this. Just a time in history that I remember very well, actually, with the Donald Sterling case and everything. And the fact that Ed O'Neill is playing Donald Sterling is also like, I can't wait to see this because Al Bundy is Donald Sterling now. Like, this is going to be Lawrence Fishburne and Ed O'Neill alone is enough for me to be like, I'm going to check this out. And I can't wait because that's going to be coming off the NBA finals. So maybe, hopefully the Bucks are in the finals. So that's something we won't be talking about at that time. But once the Bucks season is over, I can't wait to have Locked On Bucks film review recaps of clipped episodes because that's going to be must-see TV.
Film review. We'll do a weekly recap of whatever episode we're on.
Yep.
Of Clipped, and it is going to be something else. I've already seen some of the images from the cast, and I'll just say this: I don't know if it's a flattering physical portrayal of Doc Rivers in what we're seeing so far, but nonetheless, I would imagine we'll see a trailer fairly soon, and we'll start to get some more and more details in the coming weeks, just as the playoffs are beginning. We do know we're going to be waiting on a trailer for Khris Middleton's return to the floor. Hopefully that comes this weekend. It will not be later tonight against the Philadelphia 76ers, but it's a big stretch for the Bucks. 5 out of their next 6 games are at home. That one road game, oh, by the way, is in Boston against the Celtics. But we've seen this Bucks team be a much different team on home or in home games versus when they've been on the road. We'll be back with a recap of the Bucks and the Sixers matchup on tomorrow's show. And hopefully, when we do get to next week, we're breaking down the return of Khris Middleton, or at least taking a look ahead at Khris Middleton's announced return. For Camille, I'm Justin. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow on Locked On Bucks.